a very hard realization, right? This was like a punch in my gut. The pace at which we're growing is super fast, which means the future comes sooner than you expect. Create a growth path for yourself, right? I won't even say prepare yourself. That kind of sounds like a defense thing. I'm saying let's go all out offensive. I want to grow, make more money, work at better companies, grow my revenue, work with better people. 2025, here's my predictions for what's going to happen. What's up, everyone? Today, what we're going to be talking about, I know that Jan onwards, when the cohort starts, we're going to be going deep, right? 4 months, we're going to be doing live sessions and all this stuff. At the same time, we're a live cohort. We're not a pre-recorded course. And so it doesn't make sense teaching the same syllabus if there's a better way to do things. What I've been up to last couple of weeks or so is getting deep into AI. Firstly, to understand what's the future of the roles out there, but then very practically, what can you do today? Because let me just say there's a massive competitive as well as creative advantage for folks who are early in their career who can use it to create killer outcomes. And folks who are even late in their career can use it to really do the work of themselves plus two, three other design people. So let's do this. The first key thing to understand is AI is not the future anymore, it's the present, right? So, for example, being early to something has massive benefits, but then if you're too early and then things don't really change, but you're just trying to do some new stuff, usually not a great thing, right? In this case, I want to just make it very clear AI in general is not the future, it's the present, which means it's probably going to continue into the future. So, a very hard realization, right? This was like a punch in my gut, okay? A hard realization that I had a few weeks back. And it was a kind of existential moment for me. I was like, literally, the past. Like, when the realization of all of this stuff really hit me, I realized, the pace at which we're growing is super fast, which means the future comes sooner than you expect. Always, right? So that's usually one of what it feels like to be living in an exponential tech. So AI not the future, it's the present, and it's going to continue into the past is getting obsoleted day by day, which is something even as simple as design process. I am now realizing that let's not be too romantic about how things should be in every case, right? Let's not be so romantic about how things should be. Let's have some courage to look forward at how things are about to become. And really, kudos to all of you for being here. Okay, by the way, just straight up, because even clicking this title is a scary thing for people. That's something I realized, which is the best way to deal with AI is to ignore it, right? It's to protect yourself. But kudos to all of you for being here, right? So, quick diagram here. The standard way we think about stuff is from an individual perspective. So, like, what am I going to do? What should I do next? Let's understand the big picture first and then we zoom into what you should do, right? Big picture, there is a market, there is a business. That business usually makes some stuff. And let's take this example of you are somebody who's working as a designer at a startup. Now, there is a certain market, right? So, for example, I have a need to eat food every day. And at the same time, given that we are busy professionals, it's usually easier for us to place an order, like order food, than make it ourselves or, go somewhere and eat it. So there is a market for food. People eat food every single day. Everybody eats. But then you slice this market and you say, hey, we're going to go after busy professionals. So, for example, talking about current news, right? In India, last 1 week, 2 weeks or so, there have been a bunch of new apps that are not even fully out, right? There's Zepto Cafe, brand new app, right? Although Zepto already existed. Blinkit has a brand new app called Blinkit Bistro, right? You can order stuff from it. But there are these standalone apps coming out. That's a market. There is a food market. There are certain needs, and people do have desires, right? So, for example, if I want to buy a Christmas gift for somebody and I want to buy a PS5, now that might not be my individual desire, but anyway, I have a need. I want to go participate. I want to buy something, right? That's a market. Now, overall, markets change, right? There is a supply and demand when it comes to, consumer behavior. There are startups, there are founders, right? Now, these founders, they're not saying, hey, let's go build a food delivery app. They're observing this stuff happening and they're saying, okay, I have a vision that we could do something like this and we would have some competitive advantage because of a difference in strategy. And so what we should do is we should set a goal of we should do this. We should launch a new, for example, Swish. That's a new one of these 10-minute delivery apps operates in HSR and a few more areas here. They have a certain vision for how things should be. They've raised some money based on the strategy that they have playing for the next couple of quarters. And they're like, hey, let's build this. Now, they need to build some product or set of products. They have the time to invest. So every, they have a 5 day, 6 day working week, whatever. They've got the time. They've got their team. They've hired designers. In fact, from 10K, but then they've also got engineers, operations. They've got their own kitchens and stuff. So very ops intensive. They've got the resources. Of course, they've got funding that they've raised, but then they also have these cloud kitchens that they've set up. They've got all these other resources that are helping along this way. Overall, though, the big question we have is, as a designer, what now? How exactly do things change? Now, going a little deeper into this, right? I just want to talk about this market participation concept. The supply chain of the stuff we create, like what's the overall big picture, right? Do you guys remember this classic line from The Dark Knight Rises, the Joker's classic line? Do you remember what it is? We live in a society, guys. And so despite whatever creative career we've got to figure out what the overall market is, right? I would say the Dark Knight itself is being obsoleted, right? We talked about this idea here that the past is getting obsoleted day by day. We live in a society. That itself is being obsoleted. Do we really live in a society anymore? I feel like we live in an economy. All our lives are centered around is somewhat work, it's somewhat consumption, it's somewhat production of desires, right? We live in an economy. We don't even live in a society anymore, right? And what an economy has is there are individual market participants in an economy. They have certain influences, right? So me talking to my family, talking to my friends, seeing what other people around me are doing. People in an economy have certain beliefs, behaviors, they have certain desires, right? Desires and needs. And this desire, I'm just visualizing it as a magnet. People have desires, and so they want stuff. Now, what that leads to is in a market, you have products and services, right? So in this case, the digital products that we use, or also just services, right? Like, for example, I might use the Urban Company app. That's a digital product that I'm using, but I'm using it to order cleaning services. Even let's say you as a designer, you're trying to figure out, how do I build my design business? Right? We're talking a lot of business. We're taking a very business POV at the moment. There are clients out there who have a certain need, they have a certain desire, right? They're doing something. Clients themselves are looking at users and saying, hey, I want to build this stuff. Clients themselves, like let's say you're a designer, there are clients out there who need your design services. They need you to build products for them, and they are kind of going after a certain market. Now, as you build products and services, you get paid, right? Users spend time on your apps, they spend time on your website, they pay you, they transact. Now, that helps you grow your team so people can hire more. So, if you're an employee, for example, you're here, right? You are providing products and services, you're literally working for a company that's creating something. If it's a design agency, yeah, you're doing design services. The core thing you're providing, though, is a design service. You're designing stuff for them. The whole chain here is people use your apps, you make more money, right? The company makes more money, they pay you a salary. They're able to hire more people. Now, as they hire more people, their growth goes up. They're able to invest that into things like servers, into things like growing their team. Now, overall, what this means is growth for the company as they get more users, make more money. What that also means is over time, the company develops a lot of proprietary information, right? So they have their P&Ls, they develop their processes, protocols, their internal tools. As this keeps going up, as they make more money, they are able to grow their market, right? Take over more parts of the market and even grow it and have some level of influence on the world, right? We live in an economy. We're going deeper and deeper, okay? Because I want you to understand AI, I kind of represented it in this diagram as this kind of cloud. But the reality is, AI is not just coming for design, right? I think the kind of myopic, very short sighted view is people are like, what's going to happen to design with AI? But actually, you should think about what's going to happen to markets with AI. What's going to happen to all of business with AI? Design would be a part of that, right? So, AI, it's coming in on this side, which is products, making products. You can now use AI to help you make products. You can save time. You can have these AI, we're very close to almost there. In fact, some people already have this AI employees, where they have AI agents that are doing the work for them. Resource, they're able to use their resources better. So AI is coming on this side, but AI is also coming on this side, which is as users, we are using AI tools more and more in our everyday life. So people are using, for example, ChatGPT and Claude as their personal therapists, right? They're talking, they're helping make sense of the world, right? They are using it, of course, for work. AI tools, it doesn't have to be an AI tool itself like ChatGPT. Like every tool has AI features. So, for example, I was on WhatsApp today, and there is that WhatsApp. There's now a chat bubble on the bottom right, which is like the WhatsApp Meta AI, right? No, so now even WhatsApp, everybody's using that. Even Instagram, for example, Meta AI is now integrated. So you can literally go to Meta AI and Instagram and say, how should I grow my account? And Instagram talks back to you, right? Which, through Meta AI. So users are also now changing, their behaviors are changing. Overall, the market is also changing because, yeah, a lot of these AI companies are now massive, right? So talking about this piece here, NVIDIA, for example, now they are providing hardware, right? So NVIDIA or even ChatGPT or even Microsoft and Google now, right? Google's back in the game like in a huge way, right? With their recent updates that came out last week. OpenAI also in the middle of almost doing like daily launches or something. Now, overall, what's that happening is these AI businesses, as they grow, they have more of an influence on the world. And so, before we get into what AI is doing to design, try to understand the big picture of what AI is doing to the world. And when we say world, now, guys, I'm mostly talking about the economy, right? Because I think the world we live in today is a bit of an economy. Yeah, that's a bit of a dystopian way to think about it. But from a work perspective, it's useful. It's useful to think about this, right? Okay, the bigger ecosystem, though, now that you guys understand the business side of things, the ecosystem for any business. Now, we talked about this idea that there's a market. So on the extreme left, you can see there's people, right? There is a market out there. This is how typical content models look like today, right? So there is a market out there. You want to capture their attention. So what you do is you make content. I know we spend a lot of time on Instagram, Twitter, like even YouTube. Right? We're meeting on this platform. Businesses increasingly use content to capture attention. Now that's nothing new. It's just that the distribution today is via social channels. In the past, a lot of it was advertising, TV, radio. And folks, if you're a freelancer, you want to do your own products, very crucial that you understand this to some extent. Okay, there is content. Now, of course, content, I don't just mean reels and YouTube videos, but overall, you see ads all the time. There's TV stuff. You see stuff on, of course, your phone, on screens out there. We read articles, whatever. There's content. Now, usually this content, it leads to some kind of brand awareness, but in a more direct way. Let's say you're on Instagram and you come across a really cool, you're like, hey, these guys make boba. Like they make bubble tea. And then you see their link in bio and you're like, yo, these guys deliver via Swiggy and it's going to take 20 minutes to reach. And you're like, okay, let's place an order. So your market, you're on Instagram, you're scrolling, you come across this reel of somebody making bubble tea, and now you want to go to their website or you want to go to the platform. I want you to just understand the whole picture. There are funnels. So, for example, let's say you are selling your design services, you want to be a freelancer, you would probably make some content out there. Now, this content, it could be cold DMs, right? Cold emails, cold DMs, that's still content. But maybe you're doing YouTube, maybe you're trying to, capture the attention of the clients who are in the market. There's usually some funnel. So, for example, they might get on a discovery call with you, they might fill a form, they might go to your website, they might read your portfolio. But, folks, I want you to understand this is pretty much how it works for online businesses, startups, agencies. Let's say you are at a startup. This is probably how your startup somewhat looks like. I guess you can probably map it out, right? Now, this product, of course, doesn't have to be just a dashboard. It could also be an app. So let's say one of you here, you work at Blinkit or something. Now, Blinkit, you might be working on the app, and at the moment, you might be working on, let's say, one particular flow inside the app. But remember, every single day, this flow is happening. This is a little bit on the user front, right? Like, but behind the scenes, there's also other stuff here, which is when you're placing your orders, there is checkout flows, right? So, for example, as a designer, most of the time you spend is somewhere in this middle, right? So, either you're working on the website. If you're working in marketing, you're spending most of your time in the front. So you're spending it in, how do you capture the market? How do you create content? How do you engage? Not always, though. Some marketers. Other than that, for example, there's also things like integration. So let's say you place an order. As a designer, you have to logically figure out what's the path a user follows. How do they discover the services available inside? How do they, what's the journey through the app? How do they just not feel confused? Like this, this diagram, or user doesn't know this diagram. To a user, it's just like going through, right? It's a one continuous space in their phone and they're going through and they're getting distracted by notifications, whatever. They're trying to use your app. Now, folks, clear so far. Like I want to go into the depth here, but I'll just touch upon it. Let's say you place an order, right? Now you decide what to order and you just placed an order. Now you use this tab bar at the bottom and you're like, okay, my recent orders. Now behind the scenes, what's happening is this order is being sent out to the restaurant, which is another product. It's being sent to the delivery drivers. They're like, oh, finding a delivery driver in your radius, match happened. Like there's a full, like this flowchart here, there's another equal flowchart on the other side, right? Which is the supply side. There's operations, which is like people are shipping stuff, your order is on the way. There is some infrastructure in the backend. You are getting an email saying, oh, your order has been received. You're getting an SMS. There is, of course, the app. There's the website. This could be the client side, supply side. There's a dashboard for restaurant to see all their orders. This, of course, this cloud right here. This is the overall database that Swiggy or any company has, right? Their orders are being placed. A lot of stuff happening on the back end, right? So this is overall the ecosystem. Now, when you look at something like alternate hardware, right? I don't want to pretend like it's just apps and websites. Let's say you have alternate hardware. So, for example, you're driving a Tesla, you're driving a Rivian. Now, this Tesla, to do object detection, to do all of this stuff, it is interacting with the infrastructure in the background, right? So, it's making calls to Tesla's server. And there are some integrations behind the scenes, right? There is some infra behind the scenes, and there is a lot of stuff happening. But you guys get it so far, the big picture here. Now, that's the ecosystem, right? That's the overall thing. Now, you as a designer, the decision you are going to soon have to make is what part of the ecosystem or what part of the market do I want to design and how do I want to participate in this stuff that's happening? You as a designer, of course, you have some projects behind the scenes, right? So if you're new, by the way, it's okay. You're going to build some projects, right? Maybe if you've enrolled in the cohort, yeah, we're going to give you some solid briefs, apps, websites, stuff you have to design. We'll go through all of that. But as a designer, let's say you have some experience, or even as a designer thinking about the future, what you really want to think about is, bro, as now AI, as it takes away parts of as it makes things easier, or as all of this is changing, the thing is, there's not going to be some end state that it reaches. It's going to constantly be in motion, right? So this is constantly going to be in motion. There's no end state it reaches where, oh, now we know what AI is going to do. We'll probably know that 20 years later in hindsight, right? But till then, it's going to be every single day movement. Now, I was saying earlier that even something as, should be basic, something like design process is not the same anymore. How exactly do designers, devs, PMs, product managers, how exactly they operate? One funny thing, every time I come across product management reels or something, the comments, everybody's like, Pradhan Mantri? Pradhan Mantri? Like Prime Minister? PMs, I guess PM is not a very common term. People don't know what PMs are. Anyway, designers, devs, even the way we collaborate, not the same. It's changing. Now, I'll talk about it in some brief, right? A typical designer's point of view on how process happens. Now, why are we talking about process in the first place? This flow is constantly happening. And usually, as a designer, when you join a team or you want to, if you're a founder, by the way, your goal is, how do I set this up? How do I set up my own ecosystem? If you want to start an agency, you want to set up some kind of ecosystem where you're getting leads, you're converting them, you're doing work, you're progress tracking, you're sending invoices, all of this stuff. But as a designer, you want to find your way in this. Very likely, if you're a graphic designer, you're a video editor, very likely that you're working in this part. If you're a marketer, maybe you're a web designer or you do websites, you're working in this part. Maybe you have an agency. As a product designer, you're kind of working in this part and then this part right here, but also a lot of this part, the website. Now, yeah, there's a small percentage of us out there who are working on things like smartwatches, AR, IoT devices, self-driving cars, and all of that. And that's a very niche, still new, right? Okay. So now the typical process as a designer that we kind of are familiar with is research, information architecture, then you do wireframing, then you do copywriting, then you do visual design. interaction design, you make prototypes, and then you hand this off to an engineering team. Now, a product manager might help you with some of these top tasks. So, helping you do market research, figuring out what exactly is to be built, figuring out the overall information architecture. A UX person might really go depth into, the research part of things. They might go deep into how do we make our app more accessible? How do we make it more discoverable? So, that's aspects of information architecture. They might do a lot of wireframing. Somebody who's a visual designer might go deep into, of course, the visuals of the app, but also things like interaction, right? They're going to have some animations, they're going to have some kind of delight, they're going to try to make it pop. A lot of that is going to be done by visual designers and then prototyping, right? And then usually, so far how it's been is you hand it off to a developer, right? Now, of course, it sounds like goodbye, but handoff also is a lot of stuff around collaborating with developers, right? It's not really a handoff. You work with developers and you work one by one, sometimes pixel by pixel, and you have a lot of discussions around how exactly you put this together. The thing to know though is moving forward, it's my opinion that this is going to get obsoleted, right? These steps are going to get obsoleted. Not to say that nobody will do them, but then what it means to do them itself is going to totally change, right? So, from a founder's POV, the reason we're taking a founder POV, by the way, is because you want to understand, you're working for a company. What is the company's goal, vision, and strategy? What is that? Because usually what you have to design is dependent on the vision strategy of the company. Like if some of you, by the way, work at early stage startups, you probably have a very good understanding compared to, let's say, somebody who's still in design school today of how a real process happens, right? It doesn't really look like what it's on the left, although it's not so linear. There's also the concept of iteration where you kind of have to keep jumping back and forth between steps. But the founder's POV is that you figure out what should be built. And so there is usually some observations about the market, some kind of problem that's being solved. There's a certain type of user that you're going after. So let's take a B2B example. You're making a software for real estate agents to manage their clients' deal flow better, manage their clients, let's just say. Now, the problem there are a bunch of problems that they might have with existing solutions, right? Maybe you want to make a mobile version of something for real estate agents, but then the user here would be agents, right? So you're not designing for everybody, you're designing for a very specific type of user, real estate agents, and they have a certain behavior, they have certain domain knowledge of how they work, and then you want to build certain solutions from them such that your app or whatever you're designing can become a part of their workflow. But from a founder's POV, it's figure out what should be built, define what the scope and timeline is, what should be built versus what can be built. What can be built, anything can be built. We can build a lot of features, but usually you have to realize that while you're building, you have to also have market activity going on, right? So while you're building, your old products have to be out there in the market being used and, making money for you. So the thing we have to realize is founders or the people you're working for usually have these market demands on them. They can't build everything because they need to say, what's the scope, which is what exactly should we build? What should we not build as well? And then timeline, which is ideally, if it takes you a year to build a product, in that year, the marketplace could make you obsolete. Like somebody could take over, or you take a year, but then by then the behaviors of users have changed. And so now your product is kind of built on the past. So the approach typically in the software industry that we take is we do incremental updates. We do progressive shipping rather than build everything and launch it, which is we build a small part of it, launch it. It's useful, right? Usually called an MVP. Over time, you build it, you add more features. Now, what they would do next typically is they figure out what should be built, define what the scope and timeline is, and now they work with the designer to start visualizing some of this stuff. You start taking these requirements, trying to figure out what the experience is going to be. You're trying to visualize the flows. At some point, you also start figuring out what the interface should be. What's the exact thing that an end user interacts with? A lot of times, right at the beginning, like figuring out what should be built, it might just be the product manager, designer, developer, founders all together figuring this out. But typically, at some point, the developer gets involved and they're like, okay, designer, you're working on this stuff. I'm going to do the front end. Okay. Meanwhile, the backend guy is going to start building these APIs. We're going to get started. My suggestion, the reason I'm talking about this is we can't be tied to our romantic version of what the design process should look like. We need to understand the realities of the world that we operate in. We need to understand the realities of the world the people who are paying us operate in. The simple summary I can give you here is what, why, who. Okay. So what are we going to build? Why, which is what's the end goal we're trying to achieve? Why should users care about it? Why does this create value in the market? How do we make money from this? You need to have a strong why. Beyond that, who? Folks, realize it or not, we're in a very attention deficit kind of environment, right? Like even if you're sitting on your reels for an hour, you're probably watching like 100 reels. So a company who's trying to stand out, trying to make you a paying user or something, whatever they have to say has to be goddamn relevant to you. So when you're building, you need to be very clear who you're building this for, right? So the what, why, and who. Now, there's also the how, which is once you figure these things out, the how is you figuring out solving the right problem. So, for example, you might realize after doing all this, okay, what we need to build is a certain modules in this. We need to build a website. The website should have this call to action, and then the app. Let's not do an app right now. Let's only start with the website. We'll have a dashboard on this. We have these limited functionality. Solving the right problem, which is how, like, in the limited time, like for this upcoming release, what exactly is going to happen, and then solving the problem right, which is then going into the details, actually building things out. I want to just show you the typical product org. Typical product org kind of looks like this. You've got leadership, business, sales, finance. You got a marketing or content team. Usually, let's say creative. Maybe that's a design team. Maybe it's design plus marketing. These are some of the roles that you might have. The reason I want to show you guys this is now we are getting to the point where I'm talking about how is this relevant to you as an individual. If your goal is to get a job, in the past, it was to build your skills to be a very close match to whatever the available titles or roles are out there. Now, folks, even though it's like a lot of roles, and I only wrote down these two, like product manager, front end, back end, I just put a small summary. Usually, most roles are product designer, UI, UX designer. Usually, if it's early stage, they expect you to do multiple things. So you might have a role which is a general role. So like it's just product designer. But then of course you're doing some research, some interaction design. If you know motion, you're doing motion there. You might eventually become a lead managing other designers or a head of design. But this is how it works, right? Coming to AI, the current landscape, now there's way more tools than this, but I'm just talking about some of these right now. What's the future look like? So firstly, what's the present with these tools? How exactly does this change things? And then prepare yourself or even create a growth path for yourself, right? I won't even say prepare yourself. That kind of sounds like a defense thing. I'm saying let's go all out offensive, right? Let's be like, yo, I want to grow, make more money, work at better companies, grow my revenue, work with the better people, maybe hire people. All that is growth. And it's not prepare yourself. That's a very defensive stance, right? It's like, okay, what am I going to do? How do I get a competitive and creative advantage? Now, folks, here's what I see happening. Okay. For the last 10 or more years, right? So let's say from 2010 to 2015, most of the design process was Photoshop, Sketch, primarily in terms of tools. But then there was also a huge part which was UX, right? Like a lot of UX, a lot of understanding users. Now, 2015 to 2020, of course, we transitioned majority to Figma, right? UX, of course, it's still true, but mobile UX kind of took some forefront because mobile became the dominant platform somewhere during this time. Around this time is also when we had, what do you call it? Geo in India. So that created a lot of new smartphone users. 2020 to 2025, which is where the end of this 5-year path right now. What's happened? Now you could just say AI or whatever. What happened in this time is we reached peak Figma. The best time to start like design in India probably was 2015 to 2020. The best time to grow was probably 2020, 2025. Now, guys, I'm not saying you're in the wrong time or something like that. I'm just generally making an observation. But peak Figma has happened. I don't know if you guys have noticed this yet, but peak Figma has happened. Moving forward, I don't see us going deeper into Figma. I see us going out of Figma. Now, that's some kind of prediction or something, right? Because it's not so obvious yet. Why should that be the case? Bit of a prediction from me, right? We've reached peak Figma. However, Figma is the home where it all happens for designers. As a designer, you spend most of your time in one of these canvas based tools, right? So let's say Figma. Of course, we had FigJam as well. Now, FigJam, I would say, very useful for UX, brainstorming, like structured thinking, making visuals, diagrams, that kind of stuff, running these workshops, right? So, FigJam as a UX tool, awesome, right? Figma as a UI and overall tool, awesome. Okay, 2025, another thing that happened, by the way, is content. Now, content, it sounds like very vague, but, and notice I didn't say peak content, right? I'm saying content, which is 2020, which is starting COVID onwards. The our screen time has massively gone up. A lot of this is consumption based platforms, right? In 2015 to 2020, a lot of new apps. In fact, 2010 to 2015, also a lot of new apps. Folks, moving forward, 2025, here's my trends, okay? Here's my predictions for what's going to happen. Move away from Figma, number one. And I don't mean that we stop using Figma. It's like more of 50-50 kind of thing where previously it might have been, let's say 90% Figma and 10% other tools. It's going to be like 50 Figma, 50% other tools. And again, I'll say 2025 plus, right? So other is design engineers, the rise of design engineers. And what I mean by design engineers, you guys have heard the term, of course. To put it in very simple terms, you are now also coding. And when I say code, you're not learning how to code and writing and all this. What you're doing, you're actually prompting a lot of this code, right? So kind of becoming design plus dev. This is going to happen, right? This is going to happen. I see comment, which is, if not Figma, then what? I'm not saying we will still use Figma, but we're going to have actually for the first time in a long time, strong, solid Figma competitors. And more, we will realize we don't need to spend time in Figma, right? So, for example, web design, I think we're very close to a point where we're not going to do web design in Figma. We might directly go to Framer, or we might directly just start developing the site, right? Of course, we still have to do a lot of this stuff. The big picture, the user doesn't just take whatever the fuck you throw at them, right? They have their own needs, beliefs, desires, tastes. They have their own decision making, which is trustworthiness. Is it a good fit? Is it reliability? So, yes, there's going to be a lot of user centric design moving forward. However, it's not going to all happen in Figma. Okay. Now, design engineers, that's the other path moving forward. We're also going to have design generalists, which is people who say, hey, I'm not going to be doing just websites and apps, or rather, maybe it might not be a own decision, right? It might just mean that the market switches to more demanding roles, right? They start clumping some of these roles together. Moving forward, you might have more generalists where you say, hey, I am going to do, let's say, brand. Maybe you do some level of content. Maybe you do some level of course, the normal stuff, web, UI, UX stuff, that remains. But you might also do development. Prototyping is going to take a massive rise. Prototyping really goes up, which is the value of static Figma mocks is going to go way down. The value of static mocks is going to go way down. Prototyping goes up. And when I say prototyping, actually, it's very closely related to dev, which is you might not code the final product that the developer, you might not code the final product that the user uses. So let's say you're a designer at Blinkit, right? Simple example. You are probably going to, move away from Figma sounds misleading. So I'm going to correct myself there. And I'm going to say Figma dominance reduces. Blinkit example, just taking that. Now, as a designer, of course, you're designing Blinkit. Okay. You will say, okay, what needs do our users have? Folks, let's actually talk about the big picture, right? I think now is a good time to talk about this. The big picture is that's your user right there. They're in a market. They want to buy something. They have certain needs, desires that need fulfilling. The first layer that users interact with is going to be this one, right? So the reason I say also rise of content production is because even for us as consumers, discovery now happens mostly via content, mostly via social, typically video. Of course, it also happens word of mouth, maybe on these platforms, maybe offline. Okay, but users will typically interact first with this, then they're going to come here, right? So one another way I can imagine, or I want you rather to imagine, is as a designer, right now, you are like in this stack, where do you fall? You might be here right now, right here, point A on this map. You are primarily responsible for the experience and, of course, the interface. So, working out how to integrate your brand, building the platform. Maybe it's a marketplace, so there are buyers and sellers. There are certain funnels that you're optimizing for. So, there is acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. Now, a lot of core UX work might be around these things, right? So, right now, we spend a lot of time in these two layers. Okay. A lot of our graphic design, actually, why did I say wrong? It's not these two, it's these three layers. Hold on. We spend a lot of time there. A lot of our graphic design counterparts spend a lot of time here, right? So A is point A here is where product designers lie. Point B is a little bit where graphic designers lie. What's going to happen is some of these layers start merging a little bit. And actually, maybe it's your choice which area you want to merge in. So, what's going to happen is as a designer, yes, you will spend most of your time in this area, but you will now little bit have to go across like this, or you will have to little bit go across like this, or you have to go a little bit across like this, or you know what a full stack might just be is you have to go a little bit across all of this. Now, I don't think there's going to be one role that does all of these things. But folks, here's one big takeaway from tonight. Very likely in the near future, designers, whether that's product designers, whether that's product designers or content creative designers, graphic designers, let's just say, very likely that in the next 1 to 2 years, right? I'm a little bit accelerated timelines. Designers, developers, product managers might have to compete for the exact same roles. They might have to compete for the exact same roles. Now, as a developer, there is actually a huge part of like all of this stuff. I didn't even go into the depth here. As a developer, there are still going to be specialists who are really good at one of these things, right? So, yes, the need for specialists stays. But for new people entering the industry, very likely that you will have some. I'm not saying you have to do it. It just might become a very obvious thing that to stand out, I need to little bit have permeable boundaries. Another thing I will say, right? There is no one future. There is one past, right? There is one past. Of course, we all have different versions of the past. The future, though, there's going to be multiple futures. Not everybody will be doing exactly the same thing. Even today, a product designer at 5 different companies, they probably have very core things that are very different about them. Anyways, if you want to be proactive, something you should start thinking about, this is something I have started thinking about in the last 2 months, is where do I want to be? Coming back to tools, the categories we're going to soon have yellow, core design tools. You will be spending a lot of time here. Beyond that, you're going to have intelligence tools. It's a little bit general purpose assistants, right? So we're going to have a bunch of assistants and AI tools core. Like already, probably you have this. The purple are going to become the new age design tools. Now, I'm not saying specific, right? These are some general ones that I am currently trying out. There's more, but these are some of the top ones I personally have come across. These are going to be new age design tools. This is going to be Figma competitors. Beyond that, we're also going to have the dev tools. So from a tools perspective, you can't learn all. In the past, my suggestion has usually been learn Figma. You have to learn Figma because that becomes the playground where you can try stuff out. That's still true, which makes Figma and FigJam core design tools. My next suggestion is you have to have a ChatGPT and Claude tab open most of the times. Use assistants, figure out how you can get into it. Beyond that, new age design tools, spend at least 10 to 20% of your time in this area, right? The purple area. Now, these tools, if you've tried them out already, know that every couple of weeks or months it changes, right? So, for example, I remember trying out Creati and I was not impressed. This was a few months back. Now, very different. These purple tools, they are going to improve as the models get better. Don't write them off. Constantly keep an eye out for trying stuff with these. Every one of these wants to be a Figma competitor. Which of these will do it? I'm not sure. Figma dominance will reduce and it's going to be these folks who do it. Dev tools, now personally, this is a hard one for a lot of designers, right? My suggestion to all of you is go try out the blue category. Go spend time on your blue category. Very likely that our processes are going to become like this. If we can figure out what to build, instead of work with designer, what's going to happen is we're going to work with AI. And then the dev, instead of dev, we're also going to work with AI. And then finally, this launch, we might do it with designers, with marketers or whatever. But moving forward, design is not going to be the same at all. Okay. And it's a very difficult thing for me to say because I am kind of in this position of responsibility, right? Like I have to kind of teach every new cohort. But the reason we're going so deep into it now is because we're going to be actually covering a bunch of these tools. See, the core is still those two. We're going to be covering a bunch of these tools and, we're going to have sessions around it. Chalo guys, see ya. Bye bye.